today we're going to have a new friend of mine that has been involved in one of our clients for quite some time. Uh, the Jason Potts, the president of the company, had been doing some work with him, and he said, "You've got to talk to this guy." And I said, "Okay, let me see if I can get a hold of him." We connected, and oh my goodness, the introduction of information process and just the disciplines built out of that in the initial stages, and it's about to come to fruition with us. And it came to, okay, here's a little guy that's helping a company find $1 million businesses, multi-million dollar businesses, trying to understand where they are. But he's doing that with some very unique tools, and I'm not going to steal any of his thunder. But today is From Submarine Depths to Unicorn Deals, a nuclear operator's playbook. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Barnes. Jeff, you've built companies, you've lost them, you've rebuilt and funded the next generation of those same companies. I understand you ran a nuclear power plant underwater on a U.S. submarine. That's kind of unique in itself, to say the least. And then you've helped build companies with over $1 billion in capital formation and deals, advising over 1,000 businesses, identifying technology investments that have eventually sold for 9 and 10-digit figures. So today, as CEO of Angel Investors Network, the voice of alternative investing since 1997, which I need to know everything you need that you know to help my clients, which is all the time. Manager of the Angels and Heroes Venture Growth Club, and he sits in another group, Patriot Financial Capital, Patriot Growth, which is our client that helps veterans across the nation. And we, in fact, are working with that same team to build out a new veterans group and combine those today. So that is in the action. So right now, Angel Investor Network reaches more than 50,000 investors through its flagship Wealthy Renegade newsletter and Invite Mastermind Investment Club. So all of those words sounds like a mouthful. So Jeff, with that, I'd like for you to introduce yourself and tell me what you really do from day to day. All right?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Paul and Tricia. It's a pleasure being here. And it is kind of funny when I listen to you rattle all those different things off. I'm like, yeah, I do that. And it does sound very confusing even to me sometimes. So I'll try to distill it down. But the long and short is, yeah, I did start my career as a knuckle dragon mechanic on a submarine 26 years ago now, and was in the Navy on a submarine, running the nuclear power plant, running the engine room, was in charge of the quality assurance systems. We built systems for the Navy. We built SOPs for the Navy, standard operating procedures. And I was a Navy diver, security swimmer, safety swimmer, things like that. So did a number of different things while I was in the military, but realized that it wasn't for me while I was in. And one thing that I was very good at when I was in the Navy was systems thinking, and something that took me a long time to understand. I just thought everybody thought the same way I did. But it wasn't until I got out of the military and started working for a big company, and I was doing inspections on things like boilers and water heaters. It's a very windy path to where I got to where I am today. But I started doing risk assessments and risk analyses on big companies. And I was always appalled at how poorly a lot of companies were run, having come from not just the military, but also the submarine force and the nuclear force and the quality assurance and the Navy diver. Little mistakes can cost people their lives in the military. And so watching how businesses were run was kind of strange to me, because I thought, these multi-billion-dollar companies would be run very well, and normally they weren't. And I got to look under the hood and, peek behind the scenes as a risk assessment person at the large insurance companies. And that's when I started realizing the systems thinking and processes and how you manage and lead teams really comes down to a few core principles that I think most people don't really understand. Instead, they're flying by the seat of their pants. So I've built a lot of systems and ideas and technology around that. And that's how I've ended up in a number of different seats in different businesses, because you can apply the same type of principles across multiple different platforms.
Well, I appreciate that. I know that from my clientele, I'm going to say it's 70% of all of the CEOs that approach me for doing business, they need money. They either are trying to make payroll next Friday, or they're wanting to buy a company, wanting to buy a division, or wanting to sell their company. And that's where we come in to help them do all of those things. But in the process, because we do a lot of M&A work and we work with quality of earnings, we're always trying to get to the maximum dollar that they may receive. However, through the process, if they haven't prepared prior to meeting us, or if we weren't involved in the early stages of that, they're going to get pushed back on the value of the company. So one of the things I know you really focus in on is when a CEO says, I don't know how to raise capital without giving away the company. I know that you've guided companies through angel rounds, Reg D, CF structure, Series A's, etc. But in all of those, the effort was where to go find the lenders or the investors that'll leave the founders with money on the table. Share what you do there.
Yeah, it's a multifaceted approach, and it's a difficult question to answer sometimes because most people, like you said, they don't really know what they don't know, and they don't really know what the goal is or the outcome is that they really want, right? At the end of the day, they're just thinking, I just need money, right? And they haven't thought through the process of why do you need the money and what are you willing to give up for that money? A lot of people just think in terms of banks. Oh, I can just go get a loan, and if I get a loan, I have to pay the loan back over a certain period of time. And once they realize that's not going to work because the bank isn't going to give them a loan for one reason or another, then they have to start looking at alternative ways to bring the capital in. And a lot of people nowadays have seen Shark Tank or Dragon's Den. And so they understand this idea, oh, I'll give you $50,000 for 10% of the company. And that's about as far as most people think. But there's a lot of different regulations when it comes to the SEC. You know, you have your Reg D regulations, your Reg CF, Reg A plus, and all of these are different exemptions to filing as a public company, right? So when you file as a public company, you get listed on the stock exchange, people can buy and sell stock and things like that. And that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is that somebody might say, listen, I want to expand my warehouse. I want to expand my manufacturing facility, or I need a bigger team for R&D or software development. And it's going to cost me $20,000 a month for the next 12 months, or it's going to cost me a $500,000 capital expenditure that I need to make an investment in, and I don't know where to get that money. And we guide them through that entire process because a lot of people, when they're coming to us, they believe, and I use that word intentionally, they believe that by making this investment, it's going to make their company much more valuable. So of course, why wouldn't somebody want to give them the money, right? But the thing that they forget is what the investors believe. And the investors believe that if I give you my money and you don't do things right, I'm going to lose all my money. And so we have to constantly go back and forth with that. And this just comes down to sales and marketing, and quite honestly, which is whenever I'm handing you my money for a product, service, technology that you have, I'm expecting that to outweigh the cost of that with value, right? So you give me more value than I give you in money. And investing is the same thing. If somebody's going to hand over their cash, their investment, their money that they've worked very hard for, they're going to expect to get something back in return that's more valuable than the money they give you today. And most people, when we're talking through that process, does that mean that you're paying them interest? Are you giving them dividends? Are you giving them equity in your company because you expect the company to grow and you're going to exit at some point? Are you just going to have a follow-on round, which means you're going to raise more money and then maybe pay them back at that point? You know, there's a lot of different ways to structure this, but it really comes down to what's the goal that you have in your business by raising capital, and where is that going to take you? And then eventually, how are you going to pay them back?
Well, through that process, when we're involved with them, and this is a relatively new situation for us, meaning over the last year and a half here, and that we're trying to establish value in the company, create additional value, 300,000 of EBITDA that we can find and put into the company through the time of selling, and that's where my reference is here. That creates anywhere from 400 to $1.2 million increase in money that they're going to take home. So one of the things we work with, and this is where, for me, your shining light is, one of your shining lights adds to your money situation, is I can't figure out where AI actually fits in my business. So with what you've been doing with deploying emerging technology, the different pieces, let's step into what you're doing to help businesses identify things that can help them cut costs, be more efficient, be more proficient, and earn more money in the process, whether they're for sale or not. They need to do that. So share with me what you think you're able to bring to that company without it being every shiny object idea.
I will try to make this quick and narrow it down as best I can. Obviously, we're taking some hard turns here with these topics, and I think it's really important to understand that they all tie together, right? When we start talking about raising money, everybody's pouring money into AI right now, and it's not that they're pouring any money into ChatGPT anymore. It's other ways that you can use AI to solve bigger problems. And one of the things that I tell my kids, and I tell practically every client that I've ever had, is the way that you make more money is you provide more value to more people, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways you can do that, but the goal is to increase the overall value of a company as well as, and you do that through EBITDA, cash flow, right? Trying to make it more efficient, more productive. So it's top line and bottom line growth. But in this day and age, things have shifted and changed in so dramatically, right? I remember just a few years ago, the first time I got on ChatGPT, one of the first things I tried to figure out was, well, how can I create an entire year's worth of content and just figure this out? And in less than a day, we had all the content we needed for an entire year just by chatting with it. Now, was it great? No, of course not, but everything's gotten better. And so going back to this idea of increasing the value of our company, that's really the cornerstone of what I focus on is how do you increase the value of your company without the CEO or the C-suite doing all the work, right? And if we can distill it down even further, I really focus on owner operators. These people that have started their business, that have grown their company, that have gotten to a certain point, but they're at a plateau, they're at a ceiling, and they're saying, I either need to hire more people, which I don't know how to or want to do, or I need to find a way to duplicate myself or sell my business or bring on managers and other C-suite. And these are not the people that want to do that necessarily. They built a nice business, maybe 5, 10, $20 million in revenue, and they're comfortable where they are, but they would like to continue growing. And so when we look at it through that lens, one of the things we say is, well, how can we use AI to maybe free up some of your time? What are some of the things that you are doing on a repetitive basis that maybe you don't have to be doing anymore? And things like creating content, getting on and writing emails, writing blog posts, those are really basic things that a lot of these folks are doing because they want to get their personal brand out there. They want to get their business out there. So they're doing a lot of that stuff. CRMs, autoresponders, anything that has to do with marketing automation can be supplemented with AI. Another thing that we're really looking at right now is using AI to analyze businesses as a whole. And when I say that, what I mean by, you mentioned Patriot Growth Capital, one of my companies that I'm a partner in. We go through and we analyze probably close to 20 deals a week. And we do a full analysis using AI that we've built out, which analyzes every facet of the company, everything from the financials, the spreadsheets, the tax returns, to a complete write-up, to the org charts and things like that. And we're using that information, ingesting it into AI and saying, based off all this, here's some of the things that we want you to give us help with. Give us an output and give us a report. And we're able to do that same exact thing for businesses that are looking for ways to improve their ranking on Google, or how do you improve your advertising spend on Facebook? We're using that same exact process to build, again, it's architecting a system that's going to give you an output that's going to help you understand how to run your business more effectively, right? It's not just how do I go type into ChatGPT and get a better prompt or get a better email that I'm going to write out. It's how do I make my business more effective so it can run better without me being involved in every aspect of it.
Well, that's generally where I got introduced to you, is that Jason and you had some conversations about that. You did your magic with the company and the results of that. And I'm going to quote what I believe is accurate. You said, we can do this in a relatively short period of time. We don't like to tell them how short a period of time because they don't think they're going to get their money's worth. But we're able to, and I'm going to let you say the time, but we're going to be able to take all of that information, which from our experience, let's put it that way, we'll go in on a company that says they've got the things there, and it will take days and sometimes weeks to accumulate, redact, get the things from them, etc., to at least start coming to a conclusion on the value of the company or what they need to do because they're not going to be able to sell right now. And to have your tool there that can cut that kind of time down into a really short time, going, okay, Jeff and I have got to talk. We've got to figure out how can we work together to do this in our company? How can I bring people that need money to Jeff that can provide money? and we start developing a relationship and a partnership where those things go both ways. So that was my incentive of picking up the phone and calling Jeff. Actually, I picked up my email, sent it to you. Let's get on a Zoom. I want to meet you. And fortunately, we have very many things in common, including Patriot Growth that you're very much in the middle of, and I want to grow. In fact, is I have meetings this week with all of the staff and the new arm that we're helping build there right now for veterans. And I'm sure somewhere in here you're going to be roped into coming back around to, okay, how do we finish building this out or what we need to do? But we're hoping to kick it off on the 1st of July. So that is around the corner. But
Absolutely.
okay, let's take this. We got in AI. We've said we've got to do these things. And I'm going to ask you that question and then I'm going to go on. Give me an estimate of how long it takes your program to when the data to tell them that this is what it's worth, or this is what we've got to have so that we can find out what it's worth. How fast is that?
Well, without just giving us a specific number without any context around, let me give some context first, right? When I worked for a large company, a Fortune 500 business, we were doing a project where we had 250 remote field staff, and we were trying to analyze as much data as we possibly could to find out a way to make us more efficient so that we could save costs. And it took myself and a few other people, 3 to 4 months to just gather data, to build the macros in the Oracle platform and to pull the information out, then to sit down and look at it. And then it took us another month to present it to the team and whatnot. And in doing all of that, we ended up creating a 30% cost savings on a $30 million business unit in about 12 months. Now, with that exact same process, if I have the data, the hardest part right now is not like what it used to be. It used to be really hard to just get the data. Now we can pull the data, and if we can put it all into one folder, I can get an entire analysis done in 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the size of the files and what we're going through. And of course, we have dummy checks in place. We don't just trust AI to do all this stuff. We have built out algorithms and prompts and some guardrails on the AI to make sure it does what we want it to do. And then if we go back in, we review things. If it's not quite right, we have it get fixed and whatnot. So it's always an iterative process. But yeah, we've taken processes that can take sometimes months down to an hour or so.
Which I appreciate in the fullest. So I wanted to kind of promote that because I know we're going to have a lot of people that are wanting to sell, wanting to buy, and companies that have that as a business. I think they'll want to know for this, once they have the opportunity of talking about this, or at least to know what you can do. So let's take that, and in the concept of what you're doing with that. Okay, now I've got a company. I'm growing fast. I know what my business is actually. I don't know what my business is actually worth. Talk to me about how you use that proprietary valuation framework to go through the steps to understand what is going to drive additional value for those exit multiples and what to fix before the diligence team finds it first.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, there's caveats to all of this, right? At an earlier stage company that's been around for less than 3 years with a hockey stick growth curve, then they're trying to give you astronomical projections based off of annual recurring revenue and their year-over-year growth and things like that. And yeah, maybe VCs like that, and the people that are the investment bankers of the world that can sell it and take it IPO, they might really like that. That's a different world than maybe the small, medium-sized businesses and the small cap companies out there that are saying, listen, I've been around for 10, 20 years. I have consistent cash flow. We're growing 3% to 10% year over year. And we're trying to implement new ways to grow and to cut our costs at the same time. You value it based off of discounted cash flows, net present value. You understand all that fun stuff, as well as multiples of EBITDA. And that's generally the basics of this world of M&A is people will look at your EBITDA. They'll take the trailing 12 months, the last 3 years, average them out, try and figure out where you are. Based off of the industry, based off of how big that industry is and what the combined annual growth rate is, we'll say, okay, we're going to give you a 6x multiple. So if you had $1 million in EBITDA, averaged out generally over the last 36 months, then we'll say, okay, you're worth about $6 million. And that's like almost just putting your finger in the air and feeling which way the wind blows, in my opinion, because there's so many other factors that can really change how valuable a business is. And I'll give you a really good example. We just killed a deal with a company. It was a great company, really liked it. They've been around for 50 years now. but they had over 80 employees and about $2.5 million in EBITDA. And then we looked at another company that we actually did get under contract, and they have 2 full-time employees with almost double the EBITDA. So when we're looking at this, we're saying, well, which one is more valuable, right? And even if you took the multiples would change the value of company A versus company B, right? But you say, okay, I have 81 employees and I'm making $2.5 million. Even if this company only had 2 employees making $2.5 million, the one with 2 employees is much, much more valuable, right? Just because of the headaches, what we call the PETA factor, right? Things like that, dealing with all the taxes, all the HR issues that come with such a large company. And so when you're sitting back and you're analyzing a business of any size, really, you're looking at a lot of different things. Their intellectual property, what's their moat, what's their competitive advantage, basic SWOT analysis. If you want to go way back and go back to Porter's 5 forces, right? And we can talk about those types of things. But at the end of the day, and this comes from my insurance background and even my military background, is how defensible is the value of your company? If I took it over tomorrow, am I going to be able to continue growing that company without me stepping in and working my butt off to do it? Or will the team or other people come in and be able to help us grow this company? Because the one thing that I really like to focus on when we're buying a company is, and I talk about these owner operators, is how do you not be an owner operator, right? How do you get into a business that you can buy, that you don't have to run consistently? And having been that owner operator and also having been the guy that doesn't have to run the business once we have something, I can tell you being that second one is so much more fun. And that to me has become one of the most valuable points of any business. Whether you're a CEO or you're the chairman, you're the owner, if you can go and sell your business and say, oh, by the way, I work on it 2 hours a week at most, it becomes much more valuable than the same exact numbers across the board that the guy's working 40 to 60 hours a week on, because you're looking at buying a job versus buying a business.
Totally understand that. We have similar conversations about that with our companies of how to get off of the Switzerland effect, being you're totally dependent on one salesperson, one owner, one company client. Those kind of things those concentrations are not good for values of the company, and may in fact even kill a sale because of the potential risk of that. So we talked about some of those pieces. You talked about how to drive exit multiples. Now let's talk about, I don't have access to the right investors. Now I'm going to switch back. As you can see, I went from, okay, here's a building block, here's a building block, here's a building block. Now let's take it back that you've got all those building blocks working in some kind of sequence. Got it all done. I don't have the access. Angel Investors Network connects founders and CEOs, national ecosystem. Talk to us about how you take those 200 plus investor groups and put it into recognition of companies that need money, want to sell a portion, don't want to sell any, or they want to sell all. Talk to me about what you do with that group.
Yeah, it's changed a lot over the years, as Tricia knows, and I've been involved in C-Suite Network for years now, and we had to really change our business model during COVID. We used to do these live events, 10 to 20 events a year. We'd bring people into a room, put in companies on a stage, bring some really great people, including Jeffrey Hazel of C-Suite Network as one of the judges to evaluate a company and give people feedback, and everybody loved it. But when COVID happened and we had to shut our live event business down, that really hurt us in a big way, and we had to make a really big pivot. And understanding what I know about marketing and systems and technology, we said, all right, well, what we can do is we could start helping these companies go out there and do investor marketing. And people come to us and they think, okay, well, if I just bring my deal to Jeff will pick up the phone, make a few phone calls, and then I'll have my company funded. And I can't tell you how many times that's happened throughout my career. And I learned this from some of the sharks from Shark Tank. They taught me this because I think it's a very valuable lesson. I don't know, these people from Adam most of the time, even though their business looks amazing on paper. They've done a great job pitching it and presenting it. And they sound like they have this amazing track record and all of this sort of stuff. I have no idea how well they're going to succeed, if they'll succeed. And so if I burn every bridge by calling up every investor I know, every friend I know, every single time somebody comes to me with a deal, I'd stop having friends, right? People would stop taking my phone call. So what we did is we said, we need to, instead of us, giving you the fish, we're going to teach you how to fish. And what we've done is we've built up our proprietary software and systems that helps people fill their investor pipeline. Going back to talking about valuations of companies and some of the stuff we were talking about before we started the call, it's so much easier to make rational decisions when your pipeline is full. And I would say that for any business, doesn't matter what business you're in, if you have a full pipeline of customers or people begging to do business with you, it makes it a lot easier to make rational decisions. You're not in a knee-jerk reaction situation. And the same thing is true when it comes to raising capital. If I have a full pipeline of investors, of people that have money that are interested in possibly investing in my company, even if they won't all do it, if I have a full pipeline, it's very easy for me to rest easy that I'm going to be able to raise the capital when I need to. And it all starts with digging the well before you're thirsty, right? So we talk about how do you use digital marketing? How do you use events? How do you use networking? How do you use content marketing and influencers? All these different things to drive people into a funnel, to set up appointments, to start building out your investor pipeline. Because if I can solve that problem for any company out there, then it doesn't matter how many friends or people I know that have money, because they're building the relationship one-on-one with their potential investors. And that's much more valuable than knowing somebody else who knows other people.
Totally understand. All right. Well, now we're going to go to, we've got all that working. You've helped us get our marketing working. Our pipeline is full or almost full. It's never full for any company. It's never enough. You know how that goes. Mm-hmm. But I got my systems and processes. Now I can't get them to keep up with growth. Where do you step in from your military background and discipline, helping companies systemize and automate paths? That's some of the areas that you and I have recently talked about, and Sheila involved in that as well, where we're doing exactly that kind of thing. So why don't you step into that?
It's a great question. This is actually one of the things I really love doing the most. And I will also say it's the most challenging because people don't believe that it's possible to do some of the things that we do. So I gave you the example of analyzing businesses. We've had to let several people go over at Patriot Growth Capital because they did not meet our high level of standards and excellence. And part of that was, as a private equity firm, your job is to analyze deals on a consistent and regular basis. And we got to a point we'd be doing our weekly calls like, oh, I have 1 or 2 new deals to look at. And finally, the team kind of turned to me and I said, I'm going to take this on because this is it's too slow. We're never going to grow if we do this. And if I could teach anybody one thing, now I realize that I'm very different than a lot of people. I've done the personality assessments. And they're like, yeah, you're kind of weird. So, don't try and tell people how to do this. But if I could teach anybody one thing, it's how to become an architect versus the builder, right? And what I mean by that is that the architect can architect an entire system that will work without him actually having to build the entire house, right? Most architects don't get out there and swing the hammers and lay the pipe and put the electrical in, but they can build it and they can design it on paper and make it work, right? I have a unique skill set in that I can architect it. When I know what I want is the goal, I can architect the system, and I'm good enough with technology, I can build that as well. But what I tell people to do is, listen, find a way to architect a system that allows you to do the job of 3 people with only 1, right? Or 10 people with only 1. And if you can do that, especially in this age of AI and systems and technology and APIs and webhooks and all these different things, we can do this a lot more effectively. Architecting the system is what allows us to speed things up. So that business evaluation software that we created, yeah, it took me a while to build it, right? And there was a lot of iterations, there were a lot of frustrations and screaming at my computer a couple of times, wondering why it's not doing what it's supposed to do. But once we built that, now we can analyze 10 deals a day if we needed to, 100 deals a day. There's really no limit. And I'll use my wife's business as an example as well. She runs the Women Gun Owners Association of America. No employees. It's just her and I do the marketing and the technology in the back end, but she's the face of it. She does the social media. She helps us stuff out. And it took a while to get everything going. And now we're at a point where she can run webinars and she can sign people up and we get 500 people to 1,000 people on a webinar. So it's just her. Sometimes there'll be a co-host or a guest with her that's doing some training. And by implementing a marketing system, it allows her to sell at an astronomical rate as opposed to a salesperson picking up the phone and calling, right? So one to many is very much one of my goals when it comes to sales or even raising capital. But building a system around it, architecting a system that allows you to do the job of many, many people with only one person is not only going to make you a lot more money in the long run because you're not paying all the payroll and taxes and things like that. It's also going to give you a lot less stress because, let's face it, sometimes employees are the biggest challenge in any of our businesses. And at the end of the day, it leads back into the valuation of a company. If I can grow a top line and bottom line even more because I have fewer employees and fewer mouths to feed, not saying that we don't want to help people and bring the right people in when we need them, of course, but we want to be efficient. And the more efficient we are, the more valuable our business is. So it kind of all ties together.
I recalled in that conversation the first time you and I had one, you gave us a visual illustration of the statistics of a group that you started, I believe, back in February, March, that was running at one pace. And once you instilled all of the techniques that we're now talking about, putting feet to the talk, do you recall that conversation? You know, we went from I don't know, if I recall, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 impressions to 38,000 impressions over a short period of time. Would you elaborate on that? Because when you talk about those kind of things, get CEOs' attention. Please share that illustration for me if you don't mind.
Yeah, I will. And it comes with my own company. I never try and teach somebody something that I don't know how to do myself, and never try to install a system for somebody that we haven't done for ourselves, right? So over the years at Angel Investors Network, we've been around since 1997. We had a lot of um, really great legacy information. Unfortunately, back in about 2018, we had a group go through and rebuild our website, and we lost all of our historical information. It was terrible. It really hurt us in a big way as far as organics, SEO, everything like that. And so over the years, we were hiring people to write content, to put stuff out there, and it was expensive. You're talking $2,500 to $5,000 a month per employee to just get somebody to write content, to do blog posting, to do the backlinking, to write the emails, to send them out to the database. And it just got to be too much. And I said, you know what, forget it. We're going full on direct response. We'll do our advertising to our landing pages and build the funnel, make money that way. And that worked, but we were never getting organic. And so what ended up happening was last year I ended up having open heart surgery. I was 43 years old. I'm laying there in the hospital. Luckily, everything went really well. I had to have a single bypass done. But as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, and the doctors are literally telling me it's the stress that's killing you, right? You're in otherwise good, healthy condition, but you have some genetic issues, and the stress is definitely compounding this. And so you've got to get this fixed. And so I went from a point where I had been dealing with employees and partners and challenges in my business to say I need to find a way to grow this company without doing all the work all day, every single day. And of course, I understand AI very well. I understand technology. I understand the world of marketing very well. So I said, let's put all this stuff together and let's create a system to create content that's going to drive impressions on our website. And in about 2 weeks, it took me, maybe an hour to 2 hours a day, just, fiddling with all this stuff. We were able to implement a system. We rebuilt our entire website. We looked at the other competitors out there in the space. We said, we're going to get rid of our existing business model. We're going to shift it completely over to, something like Motley Fool. So Fool.com, Agora Publishing, things like that. Because we are a publisher. That's really what we are. And that's what allows us to use these SEC exemptions. So we need to start publishing more. And now we're publishing anywhere from 20 to 30 articles a day, fully researched, fully QA'd, with backlinks, with, source articles, things like that, an entire glossary on our website. And we went from getting roughly 1,000 impressions a day on Google search to now we're getting over 40,000 impressions per day. So a 40x increase, again, by architecting a system with a goal in mind. And so now that system pretty much runs without me. I get messages every single day. So I can go do spot checks on the quality and read through his stuff. And, it's kind of important that I know what's being published on my own website. So now we're running the team of what probably 10 to 20 writers could do using AI and using marketing systems.
But I know I'll push this back. I know C-Suite Network, Tricia, she'd love to have a 40-time increase in impressions. I would love to have a 40-time increase in impressions. I know Sheila would too. That is her business. So that got my attention. It's like, okay, let's talk further through that and figure out how we can put that together. So I think at this point, here's a public announcement that Jeff has come into a partnership as a vendor to myself, and we're building out a marketing program to take advantage of and build out the skills that can be afforded by small companies. We're the same companies we're talking about, the $5 to $50 million companies that are trying to find what they can do to improve their companies. That's what we're putting together, and then all of that in coordination with Tricia Ben. So we're hoping to have this very shortly finalized, put together, and needless to say, have the engine running. And Jeff, you're the engine. Let me mention that the initial engine and getting all this done, and then we have the teams to back it up, the support teams, and et cetera. So that is what I'm looking forward to coming down the pike, and we hope to have that very soon. So in kind of wrapping where we are with you, though, that you're the star of the day. So I want to make sure everybody knows there's an opportunity here that you may not have known about before. Jeff has the ability to do that and has successfully done it for other businesses. So let's talk about, I've had success, but I've had failure. You built business from 0 to 7 million in 9 months and watched others come apart as fast. Your story is raw, it's real, you've been there, you have been down the pike, that you're talking to CEOs now that have either gone through all of that or they're fearful of going through that. And I think you have a story and a method and a process that between you, Sheila, Tricia, myself, we hope to put out there to help other companies go through the first part of building and not go through the back part of it falling apart. So tell us about what you've been through and how you think that all can be pulled together.
Yeah, well, I got to say, I've been through the ringer more times than I care to count. And the one case study you're talking about was an e-commerce business. We started up in November of 2018. By July of 2019, we had done $17 million in revenue. So from cold start to $17 million in revenue. And my job in that company was I was in charge of the finance and the operations. So it was my credit card that we were putting on, and we were using that for running Facebook ads. And we were doing anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 per day in Facebook advertising. And what we were doing is we were finding products that people were buying. We had all of our employees and our tools and our spying stuff that we go out there and figure out what people are buying. Then we'd go and create an entire website, a Shopify site, and start selling those products as quickly as we possibly could. And we would just ramp up the ad spend. And we essentially bought our market share. That's what ended up happening. Unfortunately, we were, riding high on cloud nine, thinking this is just amazing. But we said, hey, we need to go and meet with our manufacturers because it was all drop shipping, right? We had the products, we found the manufacturers. The manufacturers would just drop ship it from the line, to the customer. This is out of China. And we said, we need to go meet with these people. We need to understand what their capabilities are, what their quality control is, all these different things, because we didn't just have one product. We ended up getting probably close to 200 products, and we just scale up the ones that were doing really well. But we started seeing quality control issues the more that we'd scale something up. So we're like, okay, we need to get over there and we need to go talk with these folks over in China and figure out what's happening, make sure we have eyes on the ground, people checking the stuff before it goes off the line so we don't end up with a situation. And just before we booked our trip over there, I look at my bank account and I have a $500,000 incoming wire. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. I wonder where that came from. It doesn't make any sense. I didn't recognize the name of the business and whatnot. The next day I had $1 million that came in. And so I'm calling up my business partner. I'm like, hey, where's this money coming from? He goes, what are you talking about? I was like, well, we have a lot of money in the account right now that we're not supposed to have. And I'm starting to get worried because no one just accidentally sends out, $1 million to $2 million in wire transfers, right? So lo and behold, we finally get in touch with our supplier. And what he told us is what completely shattered the business. He said, I can't fulfill these orders for you. You've sold too many. And this was in stark contrast to what we were originally told. We learned a lot about culture at that point, Chinese culture and their manufacturing processes and all that. They will just say yes and take on whatever they can, whether they can't or not. And they flat out lied to us. And then on top of that, because of the supply chain issues we had, we kind of snubbed a couple other manufacturers that could have taken this on for us, but they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't take on the business. It was a pride thing for them, ego thing for them. And so we ended up having to shutter the doors, offered 50,000 refunds to customers because we could not fulfill the orders. And you'd think that would be, one of those things you could possibly recover from. But when you issue that number of refunds and you have chargebacks, all of a sudden the merchant accounts get shut down. The credit card payment processors get shut down. Your bank accounts get seized. PayPal puts a hold on things. And we ended up in a situation where even though we were trying to issue refunds and pay people back and get this thing taken care of, we didn't have a way to charge for credit cards anymore. So that business got completely shut down. It took us months of digging ourselves out of the hole. We finally got ourselves back to where it's like, okay, let's get this thing going again. And then COVID happened. So the entire supply chain shut down completely. And that was the end of the business. So we had 400,000 customers. We did over $17 million in revenue. We were on track for doing over $3 million a month growing until all this stuff happened. And we learned every single possible thing I think you can learn in e-commerce and drop shipping the hard way. It was not a fun experience, but definitely came out the other side with a lot more knowledge and, a few scars on our backs as well.
Well, I think that's wonderful. And, we've got clients in the logistics business that probably can use things going now. They came on as a client at about a little less than 20 million. We've gone through some acquisitions with them now, pacing to try to do 80 million by the year. So this is one of them that's we're probably coming back to. Do you have investors? Do you need money? But they want to grow to 100 million. So let's figure out how to get them to 100 instead of 80. Right now, with the next acquisition that's in process, we hope to be at an 80 million pace. So I can see, and I do know some of the things he runs into, many of which are also offshore based, just as you mentioned. So those things kind of go that way. Well, in directing where you would like for us to tell our audience today, what would summarize your capabilities, your ability that you would like to share, and what's your culture, what your build is? Who is Jeff Barnes at the end of the day?
It's a great question. Sometimes it's very difficult for me to answer that one, but I'll do my best here. And you already know that I was in the Navy and whatnot. I got married, right after I was in the Navy. I ended up having 2 kids. Unfortunately, when I quit my corporate job to buy Angel Investors Network, I ended up going through a divorce as well. So, and the reason I had quit my corporate job was because I built up a chiropractic and a functional medicine practice that was now paying the bills and everything was taken care of. So I didn't need to travel 75,000 miles a year, in an airplane for a big company anymore. And that was a great feeling until the divorce happened. Then all of a sudden I was back to ground zero and had to rebuild everything. So I bought Angel Investors Network and been growing that and running that ever since. And got remarried to my amazing wife, Amara, back in 21. And just, we've been on the roller coaster, as I'm sure everybody has been in business the last, 6-7 years. It's been a wild ride. We've seen things change. We've seen administrations change. We've seen the weirdest stuff happen in the economy and society, politics. And that's all played a role in how our businesses operate, right? You go from a live event-based networking business. Network is literally in the name of our company, to the point where you can't do this anymore. I literally lost a deposit from an event because in 2021, Halloween 2021, we had an event planned. We're going to have about 50 to 60 people there, so nothing too big, but it was an exclusive event. People had paid a lot of money to be there. We had to have a huge deposit on that hotel. The day before this came out, the governor of the state said no events whatsoever, shuttering the doors. Hotel kicked us out. The hotel ended up going bankrupt. We didn't get our deposit back. We didn't get any of our marketing money back, right? So, we have the scars to show for some of that stuff. And that's where I realized that, I needed to become more resilient. Unfortunately, a lot of these things affected me personally. And I thought, as a guy who'd been through the military, who'd been in some really dangerous situations in the past, I'd be able to handle this. But when you feel completely helpless, when you feel like the world has taken everything away from you and you don't have any control over that, it leaves you in a really dark place, and it's not a lot of fun to be there. And so I had to go through a lot of personal development myself and try and figure out, why is it that I can't get back on this horse and ride again? And it took a while. It took a very long while. It took a wake-up call of having to go through heart surgery and deal with some of that stuff before I realized that, the most important thing I could do is focus on my superpowers. My superpowers, believe it or not, are not raising money. I'm good at it because I'm a systems and a process guy. I'm good at it because I understand it and I spend a lot of time learning it, and because I wanted to learn it. But what I really am at the core, and the thing that I love, is I love mastering things, especially in the realm of technology and business growth, so that I can help others do that, right? I will tell you, though, one of the things that I don't enjoy doing, and Sheila, and this, Paul, is like, I don't like getting in there and helping to baby them and hold their hand and build the systems over and over again for every single client, right? I love showing them how to, I love getting it going, but I want them to run it. Right. So again, going back to being the architect versus the builder versus the operator, I like the architecting. I like putting it all together, making it happen, and then let them go run the systems. This is something I learned the hard way. And I think that it's really important that people understand what are their superpowers I'm great at architecting systems. I'm great at putting a system together. I am absolutely terrible at running the systems, right? If the system needs me to get in there and do it every single day, it will work for a while. And then eventually I'll need somebody to come replace me because I will just get way too bored, or I'll just get to the point where I just don't see the value in it anymore. And that's been a big challenge that I've had to overcome. But I think that, figuring that stuff out about myself has allowed me to progress and excel a lot more in a lot of the companies that I've been running.
Well, I appreciate the vulnerability, the transparency. All of us in our careers, sometime or another, have gone through some level of minor to major similar situations occur. And with that, that brings us, I guess, to where I'm going to bring Sheila in for comments here, and then Tricia in, and we'll talk in the general situation here. In that we're wanting to build something together with you. We have a lot of things to bring to this table. You have a lot of things to bring to this table. And collectively, I think we can build a product that has sustainability and putting us back into the e-commerce, or SaaS more accurately in this situation, to build a product that we can help virtually any company improve their market reach, their market exposure, their pipeline, and hopefully, if they have the internal processes to get involved and fix it, meaning I've got a call from a client, I got to take it. Okay, you've got the internal to back up and support what the external does. So the first step is to start building it out where they need it. The second step is to start helping them build out internally what they need. So Sheila and her marketing efforts, me and my financial efforts, Tricia, her networking efforts, which is phenomenal. I think there's an opportunity for this to continue going forward and be a longer term situation, hopefully to reduce stress on all parties. Hopefully it is productive, produces revenue, and in the process, the number that we receive gives our clients $10 or $40. So it's not a take, it's a give and take to help companies grow their businesses beyond where they are now and possibly beyond any expectation that they had in the past. So that's why, and like in our previous conversations, I'm going to be offering opportunities to the Vistage groups that I'm involved in, the other network groups I'm involved in. Tricia is going to be potentially offering all of this in C-Suite Network. Sheila and myself, between all the contacts that we have, going to try to make this a viable product to go out and help companies across the nation be better than where they are the day they met us. So that's kind of like my summary. And I'm going to ask Sheila if you would step in and kind of summarize where you have thoughts on this. And then Tricia, you're always the rep.
So when I look at it, I look at how many companies I've not been able to help because they were either too small or they needed so much help that it took me away from all of the other customers or clients I was working with. And with this model, it's a do it with you or do it for you model that allows us to build out the strategy first and then create the pipeline, create the funnels, create all the workflows that need to happen. But why I say strategy first is my belief is if you have a bad strategy, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't truly have a strategy, but you're throwing things on the wall, what happens is you literally fail faster. You lose money faster because you're amplifying a bad strategy. If you have a sound strategy, then you have the opportunity to grow faster, to have those successes. And I feel like bringing in all of these parts together, we can help a large community. We can give them great strategy. We have financial oversight to make sure that we're doing all the right things that need to happen, but then building out this structure that can be repeated, again, customized for the individual client with the right strategy and the right tactics by using the architect and then pulling which which plan works best for this client, and then creating it or wrapping it with their brand, their core messaging, and making sure that it's targeted to the right consumers.
I
Your
agree.
sound went, yeah, your sound went out, Paul. I'm not sure. Can you hear Paul, Sheila? Okay, so I think still can't hear. So Jeff, I am delighted to be part of this conversation. There are a couple of different directions that I think are just amazing. And maybe I'll start with the one that Paul acknowledged, which is this tremendous transparency. One of the things I will say, after being an executive at 3 enterprise-sized organizations, Canada, the US, a little the UK, and having global reach that's extensive with C-suite network, I frequently, and obviously years and years building this ecosystem, one of the things that I will say without doubt, there are very few things that we really actually know, right? But one thing I do know is when someone's not transparent with you and acts like it's all fun and rainbows and sunshine and unicorns, and doesn't level with you about the things that are really tough about building businesses, about scaling businesses, about weathering the storms that are enormous when you talk about things like COVID and recessions and market challenges and disruptions. Run away is what I tell people. If they aren't already ripping you off, they're about to, because there's nothing that's easy about it. It's about how you find those best people to surround you with that will help you get further in the right direction and create that success. And I love, the way that Paul shows up, the way that Sheila's showing up, the way that you're showing up. It's like, how do we build together and how do we create success? And I am always in for that. That's the whole raison d'etre for C-Suite Network and my personal positioning and mission in business. So I would love for you just to address that transparency piece. What does it mean to you? And you could show up with a sob story, and we all have heard those. It's terrible. The coaching of speakers to tell their sob story for a long period of time. I don't mean to sound callous, but we all have our aches and pains. How we show up authentically, the way that you have in this call, and how that's moving things forward for others in terms of your mission. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that, because the values that we hold are everything in terms of how we build and succeed and see others succeed with us.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Trisha. And, means a lot. And I would say, when I was in the Navy, we had a saying, a bitching sailor is a happy sailor, right? If you don't have something to complain about, what are you doing, right? But that's not really the mentality you want to take into a leadership role when you're growing a business, right? And when people see that you are complaining on a regular basis, then they start to complain, and it starts to drag the entire organization down. And you don't want that. But what I would say about the authenticity and the transparency is I have had partners, and you've known some of them. And I had the wool pulled over my eyes because this person came in, they knew exactly what I needed. They realized that there was a pain point that I had in my business, a blind spot that I had. And I said, I just want you to solve it for me. And they said, done, we'll take care of it. No problem. Make it all happen, blah, blah, blah. Ended up being the worst decision of my entire career. And it cost me time. It cost me money. It cost me stress. It cost me a lot of relationships. And it's one of those things that you learn the hard way. And I used to think I was a good judge of character. But really what I was I was just, and I hope I'm allowed to cuss a little bit here, but if not, bleep it out. I was just told I was an asshole before. And when you get into the corporate world, you're not allowed to be one of those. You get HR training. And then I have a speech where I got called out by one of our VPs because I was the only one that failed the interpersonal sensitivity part of all the training. I was terrible at it. So I had to get better at that. And so part of me getting better at that was shedding that rough exterior and just trying to believe people a little bit more. And that went way too far. The pendulum went the wrong way, and ended up getting burned. And it was my wife that was able to kind of bring me back. She's like, you are just too nice and too trusting of people. Stop doing that. You can't do that because they will walk all over you. And that's a hard lesson learned sometimes. You think that people are going to do what they say they're going to do. And that's become one of our core values. Is an A player is somebody who's excited to do what they say they're going to do. And they just do it. And most people are not that, unfortunately. And I learned that the hard way.
It is incredibly challenging. And I will say, there is not, unfortunately, not a week that goes by that I don't hear at least one and sometimes many, many scenarios of fraud, absolutely terrible behavior, bad business partners, you name it, that have put that kind of pressure and jeopardy. So, and one recently said, "What did I do to deserve this?" And absolutely nothing, right? And then that becomes a whole other formula. But okay, so then my other question is, when you're working, and you and Paul had this great conversation about working through AI and building it into the business. What do you do in a scenario? And I have one in mind, that has been presented to me over the last year, where, look, AI has changed the world. What you're building is literally worth nothing. So what do you do in those scenarios where you have somebody who's invested their whole life, right, their whole livelihood, everything, into a business that now is not even isn't even relevant, and you don't know the timing, right? It could be tomorrow, it's completely irrelevant, 6 months, maybe a year with the AI world we live in. What do you do to counsel people when they've made that investment and now they find themselves there?
Yeah, I would say humanity as a whole is at this existential turning point. And there's a really big challenge that's going to be happening, which is these kids that are getting out of high school and college in these next few years, th- we won't even recognize their skill sets, assuming the education system keeps up with what they need to teach them, right? Because the stuff that we learned is completely irrelevant now. A really good example of this is Shopify. Shopify is a 90 $100 billion company. They ballooned up during COVID because everybody started selling online. And Shopify came out a while ago and said, we're going to just install Claude Code into our system so you guys can just use AI to build your entire website. Guess what that does to their app store? Every app developer that's been making tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars a month, they're going to be practically irrelevant. And I have seen companies like this. I had a guy who came to me, he goes, "Yeah, I'm going to start charging $1,000 to do this." And I was like, I can build, like, I literally built a cap table management software. I'm not going to say it rivals Carta. That would be hubris for me to say that, but it does a dang good job for 90% of the companies out there. And I just built it for myself because I was tired of paying $400 a month for this thing, right? And that was one of those wake up calls to me that if people get good at using AI, if they start understanding the power behind it, they are going to be a formidable force for the rest of their careers. It's the people that get scared and just say, they bury their heads in the sand and they say, no, AI is not coming for me, or no, my stuff is too valuable, or no, people like me too much. That's not true. AI can take over almost anything. If you are a white collar worker, if you're a knowledge worker, if you are a coach, a consultant, a thought leader of any kind, you need to be on this bandwagon in a really, really big way, because people are, and this is a really funny story. I had a friend who said, no, you are not allowed to see my ChatGPT history because I use ChatGPT as my counselor as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people wouldn't even think about that a few years ago, that a psychologist, psychotherapist, a counselor could possibly be replaced by AI, but it's absolutely happening. Music, television, videos, all this stuff being usurped by AI. So what I would say to anybody out there is that if you're building something new and you're thinking that you can hide from AI, don't. But if you're building something new and you are incorporating AI into it to constantly make it better, then you possibly have a chance, right? As long as somebody can't just go out there and on a day or a weekend recreate it with Claude Code or Codex or something like that.
Mhm. Paul, I don't know if we have your volume back.
We did. I didn't realize that someone helped me turn it off a while ago. And they did that because there was noise in the background. So I'm not critical of that. I just didn't realize it. But I'd say in general situation here, the people that are on this call, first, we all have been down similar paths. And while Tricia probably knows me and Sheila pretty darn well, I think she would be one of the first ones to share with you that we do what we say we're going to do, and that we're going to be out there to help people. Signature of my email is servant leader. Sheila does similar, and that's not just a cop-out comment. I try to be there, and with the council, we do a lot of that. So we're now very excited to embrace Jeff Barnes into a vendor partnership relationship with us to build this out. We're going to be pursuing that later this week to try to get finalization of things and see what we can build to help others going forward. Obviously, we're going to benefit if we do it right. But the reality is everybody that we touch, we benefit. They don't care about that. So that's where we want to be going, pure and simple, from now on. So with
So
that, go ahead.
I can't wait. And I will share just really quickly. We do have a few things coming up. So we're going to be hosting our Hero Leaders in Chicago, June 14th to 17th. So if anybody's a fast scaling CEO listening here, please join us. It's going to be incredible. And I know Rebecca will put that link in the chat. We also have C-Suite Success coming up on May 28th. That's a Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And we have the head of payroll for Tesla globally. And she is just absolutely incredible, Carolyn Hayden Gardner. So can't wait to introduce her to everybody. We're going to be socially activating for everyone that's speaking with her. Please, please, please get registered. And then also we have C-Suite coaching. So Jeff, you mentioned about the AI becoming our counselor. We've got the C-Suite coaching operating system, and it is not discoverable, and that's really, really important. So the partner that we have that's built that, their major client is the Department of Defense. So the non-discoverability is really critical as we move forward with that. So I know Rebecca will put those links in the chat, but I'm so excited, and I can't wait for the conversations later this week and all that we're going to be doing together. Relationships just build and grow, and I couldn't be more thrilled. Thank you so much, Jeff, Sheila, Paul. As always, an incredible conversation.
Well, thank you. You guys have a blessed week.